Nietzsche, a great admirer of Carmen, was the philosopher of immoral ethics. And we should always remember that the title of Nietzsche's masterpiece is Genealogie der Moral, not der Ethik. The two are not the same. Morality is concerned with the symmetry of my relations to other humans. Its zero-level rule is, do not do to me what you do not want me to do to you. Incidentally, a good rule to follow for a masochist, no? Ethics, on the contrary, deals with my consistency with myself, my fidelity to my own desire. Who formulated this immoral ethics in a perfect way? None other than our beloved comrade Stalin. Namely, on the back of the 1939 edition of Lenin's Materialism and Imperial Criticism, a copy of this book was found in Stalin's bedroom after his death. It was published a couple of years ago, this note, in it's pretty terrifying note, in some Russian journal. Stalin made the following note in red pencil. I quote, "First, weakness. Second, idleness. 3, stupidity. These are the only things that can be called vices. Everything else, in the absence of the aforementioned, is undoubtedly virtue." Envy, no? If a man is first strong spiritually, point 2 active, 3 clever or capable, then he is good regardless of any other vices. That's, I think, immoral ethics at its purest. This is a concise as ever formulation of immoral ethics. In contrast to it, a weakling who obeys moral rules and worries about his guilt stands for unethical morality, the target, of course, of Nietzsche's critique of resentment. There is, however, a limit to Stalinism. Not that it is too immoral, but that it is secretly all too moral, still relying on what Lacan calls the figure of the big other. That is to say, in what is probably the most intelligent legitimization of the Stalinist terror, Maurice Merleau-Ponty's Humanism and Terror from 1946, Stalinist terror is justified as a kind of divette, wager on the future, almost in the mode of the theology of Blaise Pascal, who enjoins us to make a bet on God. If the final result of today's horror will be bright communist future, then this outcome will retroactively redeem the terrible things a revolutionary has to do today. Along similar lines, even some Stalinists themselves, when, in half private usually, were forced to admit that many of the victims of the Stalinist purges were innocent and were accused and killed because the party needed their blood to fortify its unity. They imagined a future moment of final victory at which all the necessary victims will be given their due and their innocence and their highest sacrifice for the cause will be recognized. This is what Lacan, in his seminar on ethics of psychoanalysis, refers to as the perspective of the last judgment, a perspective even more clearly discernible in one of the key terms of the Stalinist discourse, that of objective guilt or objective meaning of your acts. While you can be an honest individual with most sincere intentions, you are nonetheless objectively guilty if your acts serve reactionary forces. And it is, of course, the Communist Party which has the direct access to what your acts objectively mean. This is the secret theological dimension of Stalinism, not this teleology, there will be bright communist future, but this perspective of the last judgment, this idea that there is a historical subject, Communist Party, which already today knows what the true meaning of your act is, which is, as it were, the direct instrument of historical necessity, which can, as it were, act from the perspective of act already today from the perspective of last judgment. And incidentally, I am tempted to defend Hegel here. I think the time maybe has come, I cannot develop it today of course, to claim that Hegel was a greater materialist than Marx. In what sense? People usually claim that Hegel's history of philosophy is a kind of a totalitarian one, you know, everything is justified on behalf of the progress of reason and so on. But what Hegel prohibits, it's precisely this position. The position of someone who, while acting in history, already controls the meaning of his or their act. For Hegel, an agent like the Stalinist Communist Party, which can say, what we are doing is only realization of a higher historical necessity, we are instrument of history and so on, that's prohibited, because for Hegel, every act retroactively produces its meaning, is done through failure, and so on and so on. So again, I think that whatever Hegel is guilty of, is not guilty of this. But back to Lacan, this is why Lacan's motto, il n'y a pas de grand ordre, there is no big other, the big other doesn't exist, brings us to the very core of the ethical problematic. What Lacan excludes is precisely this perspective of the last judgment. The idea that somewhere, even if it will be as a truly virtual point of reference, even if we concede that we cannot ever occupy this place, that there must be a standard which allows us to take measure of our acts and produce their true meaning, their true ethical status. Even Jacques Derrida's notion of deconstruction as justice, I think, relies on a utopian hope which sustains the specter of infinite justice, forever postponed, but nonetheless kept as the ultimate horizon of our activity. You know, this idea that even if it's de facto inaccessible, we must act as if there is a final point where retroactively there will be an objective judgment on the status of our acts. The harshness of the Lacanian ethics is that it demands us to relinquish this reference. And its further thesis is that not only does this abdication not deliver us to an ethical insecurity or relativism, but that renouncing the guarantee of some big other is the very condition of a truly autonomous ethics. Recall that the dream about Irma's injection, which Freud used as the exemplary case to illustrate his procedure of analyzing dreams, is a dream about responsibility, Freud's own responsibility for the failure of his treatment of Irma. This fact alone indicates that responsibility is a crucial Freudian notion. But how are we to conceive it? How are we to avoid the common misperception that the basic ethical message of psychoanalysis is precisely the one of relieving me of my responsibility, of putting the blame on the other? You know, as they usually put it, you feel guilty for your unconscious fantasies, and then as if the psychoanalyst is telling you, no, it's not you, it's your unconscious, the others discourse, don't feel guilty, you are not responsible for it. Lacan himself precisely emphasized that if anything, the lesson of psychoanalysis is that you are even more responsible than you think. You are not only responsible for what you know and consciously decided, you are even responsible, as it were, for your unconscious. And this brings me now to the first crucial ethical point, in what sense Lacan refers to Kant's philosophy as the crucial antecedent of the psychoanalytic ethics. According to the standard critique, which you probably all know, the limitation of the Kantian universalist ethics of categorical imperative, this unconditional injunction to do your duty, resides in its formal indeterminacy. Moral law does not tell me what my duty is, it only tells me that I should accomplish my duty. And so it leaves the space open for the empty voluntarism. Whatever I decide to be my duty is my duty.